Right, so here is our practice task, the park. You obviously have the instructions and the story in front of you. It's just a story about a piece of land. And we want to find the perimeter of the land, total perimeter, and we want to find the total area and do something with those numbers. Okay, so let's begin. We don't have a triangle, so the obvious thing to do would be to put a line down and give ourselves two triangles so we can start using the sine rule and the cosine rule. Now I've got two sides here and an angle in between, so I should be able to use the cosine rule to find that opposite side x. So x squared equals 80 squared making sure you copy the rule properly. Once I've got that big long number, I need to square root it because that was x squared. We want to square root the answer we got, which gives me x equals 31 metres, and we'll round that 31.3 to 1 dp. So back up here, I can just erase the x and put the 31.3 along that line there. Right, now we could move on to the other triangle, but what we might do is just finish finding things inside this triangle, like the area, but also we could find that two angles there. So let's start with the one at the top, finding that angle up there. You can't just assume that that line is cutting the 92.4 in half. You can't assume that. So what we could use is, I have a side in the opposite angle, I have a side and I want the opposite angle. So that's crisscross pattern means I want the sine rule, and I want the sine rule to find an angle up the top here. We'll call it theta for angles, which means I need the sine rule upside down. Sine theta over 65 equals sine of 22 over 31.3, which gives me sine theta equal 0.7779, etc. So theta will be sine to the -1 of the answer, which gives me 51.072. There's more to it. We'll round that and we'll use 51.1 to 1 decimal place. Oops. Okay, so if theta is now 51.1, we can work out this angle on this side, which will be 92.4 minus 51.1, so that will be 41.3. And we can also work out this one down here if we wanted to by doing 180 minus 51.1 minus the 22 gives me an angle of 106.9. Now there's rounding in there, so you might get a slightly different answer, but now I've found out all the sides and all the angles in that triangle. We'll find the area. Now at this stage I'm going to call them something, just using some letters that aren't there. I might use an E for that triangle and an F for that one. Okay, so I'm going to find the area of triangle F, which would be a half times one of the sides times the other side times the sine of the angle in between. So as long as you have two sides and the angle in between, that will help us find the area. And we'll do some rounding. 974 meters squared, and that's to 3 significant figures. Right, so we've finished with that one. Now we might move on to the second triangle over here. So I'm going to use this triangle. I'm going to redraw it down below just to make it clearer for myself. So I have one side of 42, one side of 31.3, and I have that angle. So down below here, the triangle looks like this. 31.3, 42, and we've got that angle, which was 41.3. for that angle there. Right, what can we find? Let's start by finding this angle in here. We'll call it theta. Once again, I've got side and angle, sine rule. So sine theta the 31.3 we pull up on the other side and we multiply by it. I haven't worked out that answer. You can work out that answer. But to find theta, of course, we're going to have to do sine to the minus 1 of answer, which gives me a value of 29.462, etc. We'll round that and we'll use 29.5 degrees to 1 dp. Alright, which means we could also work out the third angle in there. So this one here is going to be 29.5, which means the third angle, using 180 minus the other two, is going to be 109.2. Right, now we need to find this third side because it forms part of the perimeter. Let's call it x. Once again, my picture's getting very cluttered. Have a look back and think about what rules you've used and what rules you haven't used. We haven't used a sine rule for sides, so I might try and use sine rule for sides. Let's see if we can do that. So I want that one, and I know that angle is 109. And I'm going to use the 31.3 and the 29.5. Right, sine rule for sides, x over x equals, now that whole denominator we take onto the other side and multiply. I'll just set all the working out. Which gives me a value of 60.02755. 60 metres. That's to 1 sig fig, 2 sig fig, and 1 decimal place actually. So we'll just write one significant figure for the third side. Right. Before we leave this triangle, we might have a go at finding the area. Now we called this one triangle E, so we want the area of triangle E. I've used the 42 times sine of the angle in between the two sides we've got. And therefore the total area is going to equal the number above, so the 620.7 plus the previous answer, which was the 973. I might use that whole decimal, do some final rounding, 1595 metres squared to 4 sig fig. Now yours might be slightly different depending on rounding, but that's what I get for the area. Right, we'll go back and find the total perimeter. So the total perimeter, you look back, find all the four sides, and it just wants the total perimeter around the outside, not this extra line of 31.3. We've just put that in to help us with the working. So the values we've got are 60, 42, 80, and there's a 65 as well, which gives me a total perimeter of 247 metres. Now in the next part we'll have a look at the merit part, which is to take those numbers and apply them, relate them to something more practical.